let's corrupt the worldview. One of the world's largest pride parades canceled when pro-Palestinian protesters blocked streets. Toronto's Pride Parade abruptly ended on Sunday when pro-Palestinian activists interrupted the event. About 30 activists from the Coalition Against Pinkwashing blocked the parade 3.5 hours after it started, chanting "Free Palestine" and "Pride is a protest." This blockage caused floats and participants to halt, and after 45 minutes, Pride Toronto announced the cancellation of the remainder of the parade. The protesters had a list of demands, including divestment from companies involved in exploiting native people of Turtle Island, Sudan, Palestine, and the Congo. While Pride Toronto offered to meet with the protesters, they did not sign the list of demands on the spot. The parade is Canada's largest Pride celebration and one of the largest in the world. This incident follows a similar protest at New York City's 45th Annual Pride Parade, where protesters climbed over barricades, tossed fake blood, and held up floats and marchers for 45 minutes before being removed by the NYPD. Protesters in New York held signs reading, quote, "No queer liberation without Palestinian liberation, and Palestine will be free." This is crazy, to state the least, on a couple levels. One, 3.5 hours and they weren't done with the parade. I mean, how many hours was that parade going to go? That is, for me alone, I would have checked out. So they kind of waited for the end of the event. So, but you know, this is crazy. It's happening all over the country, and it's frightening. You know, we saw this year Ukraine put on a pride festival or parade. It may have lasted only 30 minutes, but in the middle of their war, they're out there doing it. And we're seeing, you know, in Paris, there's a huge pride festival and stuff. So there's a lot more visibility from the LGBTQ community around the world, but I don't know how effective, you know, well, I do know how they're being very effective, but it puts us in the spotlight to be pointed at as an issue.
Well, for me, it's a real issue because, you know, I get as a lifetime activist, I get it. You know, you want to take to the streets, you want to use your voice and you want to list your demands. I get the whole process, but how are you going to interrupt your own community's protest to be prideful, visible, and raise the awareness around our fight right now? And I'm not taking anything away from, you know, the idea that, you know, we should not be killing 30s, 40, 50,000 people to get a point across. And I have my friends who are my Jewish friends, and I've been always pro-Jew, you know, not necessarily pro-Israel, not necessarily pro-Palestine, not either one of the governments, because we already know that government, when they're not speaking on behalf of all the people, and the Palestinians are being cannon fodder for a war that's been going on for so long. But I know my friends, one of my friends, Chloe Joe Davis, she runs End Jew Hatred, because the reality of it is Jews are not saying die Palestinians, okay? Not the ones here, at least in the United States. You know, we're saying bring home the hostages and stop the attack on the Palestinian people. But the pro-Palestinian groups are screaming and chanting death to all Jews. Like, we have to, like, recognize, you know, there's one thing to be pro-Palestine, but it's another thing to disguise your hatred and your constant attack on the Jewish community with those pro-Palestinian chants.
But no one has said that these particular protesters called on any genocide to anyone, it's my understanding. Yeah. One thing I will say, especially about Toronto Pride, is they have a history of activists interrupting and actually putting out lists of demands for the executive director to sign, which I always found was a little interesting and different than in other prides. Like, I used to be involved in DC in No Justice, No Pride. The first piece I ever did in The Advocate was specifically about criticizing pride events for becoming very capitalistic and very commercial. And, you know, something when you look at pride events now, we say we want to invite everyone, and in some ways that's wonderful, but it's also when you invite, you know, a gun, like a weapons manufacturer or whatever, you are bringing in all those other politics into the community. And, you know, I wrote a piece a few months ago called, the title was from don't say gay to don't say Palestine. There is so much censorship of activists that just say, hey, we're not sure if we want our government to be paying for and delivering weapons that are being used in a really horrific way. You know, Benjamin Netanyahu's government is under a lot of pressure right now because of his actions, and as Thomas Friedman put in the New York Times 2 weeks ago, you know, he's trying to stay in power to avoid going to jail. Like, Israel's going through a lot of things right now, and I'm not surprised to see this sort of activism.
And it mirrors what we're going through in some ways with
I know.
Absolutely.
But I also think that, and Yvonne, I want to get your take on this, that you've got two minority groups that should be allies helping each other survive, and instead you're going for one minority group that's already being picked on and finding another reason for people to hate them because you're bringing in this in New York throwing fake blood and stuff. I mean, that doesn't build bridges. You know, that's not the way you build a community.
They're feeling desperate. They're not looking to build community. And it is surprising that although I have the same concerns you do about how complicated things get when we talk about including everyone who wants to be an ally, including corporations, what road is that taking us down? And you can't really put your finger on, well, then what belongs in these venues and what doesn't. Although I have to agree that attacking the folks that are looking at including everyone in every way possible, and obviously Toronto Pride does that, which has got to be the cleanest and best organized Pride parade I've ever been to in my life, by the way. For these kind of things to happen, as much as you say, I didn't realize.
Well, I was surprised they shut it down because in D.C., the No Justice, No Pride group, I remember got to watch from the sidelines. They literally shut down the parade, and the police, they just rerouted most of the floats. Wells Fargo got stuck. I didn't pity Wells Fargo at all, but you know
that part does get complicated because what do all those corporations represent? And then you look at our rainbow.
Right.
We have such a huge difference in the walks of life from this extreme to that extreme that belong, and they do belong to our LGBTQ plus community.
And they can't do this freely in their own country.
Yeah.
That's the irony of it. They came to something they can't celebrate at home.
Yeah.
So my question is, why didn't they reroute the parade like DC
Because it was
did?
3.5 hours and everyone's exhausted.
Do you know what's really crazy with New York City Pride?
Done.
Do you want to know how long, in 2019, I attended a press conference where they explained New York City Pride. Do you know how many hours the 2019 New York City Pride was projected to be? 12.
Hours?
What? 12. I don't know how they, I'm like, I think DC was 4 hours, and like after an hour, I'm like, I love you all, but
Yeah. It is here. Maybe it doesn't rain in the afternoon, but.
No, I'm sorry, yeah. No.
The Ukrainians had it right at 30 minutes.
Exactly.
Yeah.